A report came out earlier today that Bill Self almost took the Oklahoma State job last offseason. Some scuttlebutt about Indiana going around right now. I'm going to tell you why I think it's all a bunch of hubbub.
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on? Derek Johnson here. This is Locked On Jayhawks. Thanks for making it your first listen every day. Thank you to everydayers catching each and every episode of the show. We got a bonus episode coming at you for today, anywhere you get your podcasts or on our YouTube page. So thank you for joining us. We're going to get into a little bit. There was some interesting reporting, rumors, talk, everything with Bill Self going on this morning in a press conference. So we're going to get to all that today about was he close to taking the Oklahoma State job, why I don't totally buy into this necessarily, the Indiana opening possibly being a thing, and what it could mean for Bill Self, for this team, for his future at KU, all that on this little bonus episode of Locked On Jayhawks. Let's just get started right there. So there was an article that came out earlier on Friday, and it was from Barry Trammell of the Tulsa World. And in the article, this isn't the full thing, but this is the pertinent part to the KU perspective. Multiple Cowboy sources said OSU took a swing at Self, and Cowboy decision makers grew increasingly confident that Self was impressed with the organization of the plan his alma mater had produced and was intrigued at the package, complete with competitive salary and budget to pay players in this new professional age of college basketball. By far the closest it's ever come to happening, end quote, one OSU insider said of bringing back Self. Again, there's that quote. By far the closest it's ever come to happening. Another Cowboy source said only Self could accurately describe how close he came to accepting the OSU offer. Efforts to reach Self this week failed, but the source described the courtship as consisting of long and deep conversations. He certainly seemed interested. The pertinent part. I should probably mention that as well. The rest of the article kind of delves into like how far behind Steve Lutz was, who's the current coach for Oklahoma State, in getting to the program, and some of the things, the difficulties that was facing him in this Oklahoma State program, and how it was kind of on the up and up. It kind of read a little bit more to me, the article, as like a clickbaity title to get people to go in, and turned into an article about the good things Steve Lutz is doing in year one, that they're moving in the right way as a program. It was kind of that it was almost like, you know the movie like Click with Adam Sandler. There was another one, I think it was called like, was it Downsizing? It was the one with like Matt Damon, or Shrinking maybe, where you think the movie is this, and it gets like this clickbait. Oh, let's go to the movie, and then you go in and it's like this sad drama. That is kind of how I viewed this article. But anyway, Bill Self did respond to it. This was from earlier today over a tweet from Brett McMurphy. He said, I spoke to them, answered questions about the job, and offered my opinion about what is needed to win in our league, which I've done every time the job has opened. They got the right guy. I did join Karsten Creek, one of country's top golf courses, as an out-of-area member, but I've never spent a night close to Stillwater in the last 20 years unless my team was playing there, because there was something in the article about spending some time at that golf course. Then he mentioned in a press conference, did Bill Self, he said, this was earlier on Friday as well, I guess in Friday afternoon, Self said he has spoken to Oklahoma State every time there's been an opening since Eddie Sutton left in 2006. He said, not necessarily about hiring me, but about could be names or what I thought needed to happen in order for OSU to compete in the league at a high level. So yeah, I did talk to them. And my administration knew that I talked to them. That's a key part there. But it wasn't near the point of what was presented in the article, at least the way it was presented to me after other people had read it. He also refuted the part about the Carson Creek. Again, he said a couple days last spring, Self holed up in the Logic Carson Creek, that was the part in Trammell's article. And Self responded to that by saying, I have holed up in Stillwater before, but it's only been the night before that we've actually played a game. I haven't been to Stillwater and spent a night in the last 20 years. Maybe I did 15 years ago or something at some point in time at a reunion or something, but I haven't been there unless my team is staying there. So that is totally inaccurate. And again, he later says, I think that they got the right guy, and said, I talked to them more seriously in 2008. there's a big difference between talking and then actual interest and considering. Now, that's an interesting hypothetical. If he goes to Oklahoma State, he wins the title at Kansas, and he's like, okay, now I want to go restore my alma mater. Where would Kansas be at this point? Would the streak be happening, right? That would be a whole different conversation. But point being, for this one specifically, here's my initial thought when this article came out before we even heard from Bill Self. I think the comments from Bill Self certainly refute everything to a very aggressive way that shows to me that, yeah, I'm not really buying into this to begin with. Now, is it possible, coaches sometimes have to lie, and they do lie because what is the advantage for Bill Self coming out here and be like, oh yeah, I interviewed for the job. I was interested in leaving Kansas. Like, I would understand if he did actually interview for the job, if he did have to lie about it for that reason. Like, that would not come across well for the players, for future recruits, for the fans, right? So I would understand why you would have to lie in that situation, but I don't think he is lying here. And again, going back, this was my read before he even made comments about the articles. Coaches get offered jobs all the time, first of all. So even if Oklahoma State did just say, like, they owe it to themselves to at least make the phone call and call Bill Self, who's an alma mater of your school, and be like, hey, you want to come coach here? In the same way that, the day comes where Bill Self retires, or I guess since we're talking about it today, leaves for another school. Like, if you're Kansas, if you're Travis Goff, Jay Wright probably answers the phone and goes, nope, not interested. I'm happy being retired. I got out of this game for a reason. But you make the phone call. It doesn't hurt to see if he's interested, right? And so you can understand that. And sure, maybe you go back to the quote about it was the closest that he'd ever been to taking the job. Okay, well, what if before it was a 0.5% chance and then this time it was a 0.7% chance? And beyond that, Bill Self refuted it. He said 2008 was the one that he was kind of looking at there. So I don't know about that. I will say there was on 810 in Kansas City with Seren Petro this afternoon, they had a Mark Rogers of 98.1 in Oklahoma City on the show with them. And this is not a sourced thing from that guy, Mark Rogers, but he assumed that the source for Barry Trammell, the guy who wrote this piece, was coming from a big donor from Oklahoma State. So was he in on that? I don't know. How much can you trust in that? Maybe not, right? There's some donors that are big in on the decisions, but I don't know, man. That kind of makes it a little more sketchy for me. And again, Oklahoma State is Self's alma mater. Don't you think he, maybe he would at least consider it just for them, or going back to the idea that, it's not just his alma mater, but you look at what Eddie Sutton, the former Oklahoma State coach, meant to him and means to him. And of course, there's a certain level of, for him in the position that he is in and what he has accomplished at the collegiate level, that he probably does want to kind of give advice for them. And that's what he kind of said in the quotes here, and give respect to his alma mater. And then Barry Trammell tries to reach out to him probably this week. And again, you hear the no quote there because he was probably like, this is stupid. Or he was viewing it from a standpoint of listen, I was just trying to help out, with Oklahoma State. And I didn't want to come out and be like, oh, I would never take that job because I don't want to demean my former alma mater. And so, it's just, it doesn't really make sense to me. You look at Bill Self making $11-12 million a year here at Kansas. Steve Lutz's got a 5-year, $13.5 million contract. He's basically, and yes, you would expect more money to be had if it was Bill Self than Steve Lutz, but you're talking about Oklahoma State having this very generous package and NIL and all these things you can offer him. Do we think it would have been better than what Kansas has? Because Kansas is top notch nationally in having those things. So I don't know. Maybe Bill Self does view it as reinvigorating his alma mater would be one final piece of his legacy that he wants to do at the end of his career. But I don't buy this being the case that he was seriously going to take the job. Or again, I do buy his story that, yeah, this was just him, basically giving advice and stuff to them when they had the opening. And here's the other big piece of this to me. If you are if you are just put yourself in the shoes, you're a reporter, you're a writer, you're a whatever media position, and you get this scoop about Bill Self nearly taking the job at Oklahoma State, the school you cover. Bill Self, the best coach in college basketball, or one of the best coaches in college basketball, who was an alma mater at that school. Don't you think that would be right away, release that, get that news out there, because that is a gigantic piece of news, and you sit on it, You wait, you hold on to the story until the day before Kansas is playing Oklahoma State. Seems a little convenient, doesn't it? But let's talk a little bit, too, because I do think there's something interesting about, could this be a ploy from Bill Self's agent? I want to talk about that on the other side. This episode of the show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on a fourth-quarter comeback, you can stay in on the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. You can bet on Kansas against Colorado on Saturday. You can get in on the Mexico Open for your golf action. It's basically golf and baseball season at this point in time. We're right around the corner from baseball season. Get some futures on the Royals to win the division or the American League. And right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA and the Locked On Podcast Network. All right, continuing on, don't forget to check out our Kansas-Colorado preview, Oklahoma State preview for Saturday, and then we'll have a Kansas-Colorado preview on Monday here. Okay, one thing I did have the thought of this morning was, would this be a leak, something from Bill Self's party from his agent to get out to, like, okay, there's clearly been some unrest. There's clearly been some, difficult discussions had by people. Some people thinking that, maybe Self is getting close to retiring. Others who think that maybe it's time to move on. And from that standpoint, if you're his agent, maybe you kind of dangle this out there and go, hey, I know you guys are upset about this season, but you might want to reconsider this. Like, step back and think for a minute. Be careful what you wish for, because this guy has been the best coach, in program history for Kansas, right? You have multiple national titles, all the Big 12 championships. Like, be careful what you wish for. And maybe that's what a little bit of this is. It's like, it's a reminder. At the end of the day, I don't know that I buy into that, because I don't know what the end game would be, because I guess, like, the danger here would be pissing off the fan base, which is already pretty fired up right now, to be completely honest. It would also be possibly upsetting, like, recruits or current players, right? So I don't believe that to be the case necessarily. I think this is probably coming from the Oklahoma State side of things. And again, you go back to what was the main purpose of that article, that kind of tells me the case. Now, hypothetically, just in a different world, let's say Bill Self would have left for the Oklahoma State job last offseason. Would that have been, that would have been crazier than the Roy Williams one, right? Because, like, Roy was going home to his alma mater, which Bill Self would be too, but that was a blue blood. And with Bill Self, it would have been completely out of the blue. That would have been nuts. But yeah, I don't think that's going to happen. And obviously it didn't. And that's the bottom line here, that, people might get, I don't know, panties in a bunch, for lack of a better term, over this. But, like, at the end of the day, regardless of what happened, it doesn't matter, because he didn't take the job. And we live in reality, and that is the reality, that Bill Self is still the Kansas basketball coach. But now there's an opening at Indiana. Let's discuss that next. Okay, finishing things up here on this bonus episode of Locked On Jayhawks. So Indiana is obviously another big-name school, and they have a job opening. Mike Woodson out with the Hoosiers. There was some stuff from, if you don't know who Trilly Donovan is, he's like a former college basketball, like, assistant coach who was turned into, like, Twitter burner, anonymous, like, super sourced, getting all these, like, transfer play and rumors around college basketball. Pretty plugged in, to say the least. And with Trilly Donovan, he mentioned something about Bill Self in relation to the Indiana job this morning. It was more so just kind of floating around, like, the name with the interest. It wasn't necessarily, he wasn't saying, like, oh, Bill Self is visiting Indiana, or Bill Self is going to take the Indiana. No, he was not saying those things. It was just kind of lighting the fire under that idea, I guess, so to speak. And certainly it's interesting. And who knows, maybe I saw there was a clip from Rick Pitino earlier this week on Pardon My Take, and that was talking about, like, they should go for Chris Beard. I don't know, maybe any of the rumors that basically that's what Trilly was talking about, that there are some rumors coming around from, like, the grassroots circuit hearing some Bill Self and Indiana stuff. And again, like, that could just be, hey, I'm talking to Indiana because I want to do some favors for my guy, Chris Beard, right? He and Chris are, I believe, good friends, and maybe he's trying to help him get the job, right? And you think about it, and okay, Adidas is Indiana and Kansas. So like they'd be like, hey, can you help us out? We need some help like finding the next coach. And they reach out to him, right? So in the same way, this is obviously a very completely different story and everything like that, but I guess I would take the Indiana thing, honestly, a little bit more seriously than the Oklahoma State thing is, just because of how disgruntled things have been. And Bill Self has called out the KU students, and now you see him giving out, water bottles to get students to the game. And I don't want to get all like old man, get off my lawn. Like, we never had to have water bottles when I was a student at KU, so I'm just not going to. I'm not going to get into that. But I will say, when you put both of these stories in tandem today at the same time, it definitely created a level of chaos for the KU fans who, if you were on social media all day, if you weren't on social media at all during the day or something, you might be coming home right now and being like, what the heck is all this that's been going on right now? You're like the from Community when he walks in with the pizzas and the whole room's on fire, right? So it definitely is interesting. Again, I'm not buying into it. I don't think he was ever going to take the Oklahoma State job. I don't think he's going to take the Indiana job. He is KU basketball's best coach in program history. And I know these seasons haven't gone well these past couple seasons, but I think everybody is interested to see what they can do next year when they have a new core, when you have Darren Peterson, when you have a team that is, basically a fresh start a little bit for Bill Self, and that we can see, is this downturn more about players, or is it about, adjusting to the portal era? Like, what exactly is it? At the same point in time, you do have to at least talk about some of this stuff and maybe take it a little seriously, because I would have never thought John Calipari was going to go from Kentucky to Arkansas. And so weird things do happen all the time. But for me, like, I'm expecting Bill Self to be the Kansas coach, obviously the rest of this year, and obviously next year too, and coach up Darren Peterson, and going to move on past the rumors from here. All right. Don't forget to check out that Kansas and Oklahoma State preview right here with Locked On Jayhawks as well. See you then.